Don't worry, we're here to save you. Lads, welcome back to Fusion YGO. Now that I have your attention, today we are jumping headfirst into another episode of Deck Reviews, the place you go to find your next deck or to see if that one guy at Locals is playing a viable strategy. In today's episode, we will be covering the Amazing Defenders. Today, we talk about Rescue Ace. But before we jump in, do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below if you enjoy this video. It not only shows your support to the channel, but will help you to find more content like this in the future and get you over to our deck profiles and combo tutorials relating to the decks that I talk about in this series. With that now out of the way, there is one more thing I think I should fill you in on, at least if you're unfamiliar with how this series works. First, we will gauge the level of the threat at hand, then decide the best course of action to get over these obstacles, and finally, analyze if our Firecracker team is good enough to come to the rescue, or if we need to call in for backup. In more simple terminology, we will begin by quickly assessing the deck and its goals, go over its pros and cons, and then finally dive into the statistics of this strategy to determine where it stands within the metagame. Alright, enough with the intro stuff. It's time to save the game with Rescue Ace. Beginning with the pros, this deck recruits all of its saviors with ease. The amount of ability to surge within this strategy is astounding. Not to mention, it can be done on either turn of the game, keeping resources constantly flowing. They also have an adequate balance of monsters, spells, and traps to keep your opponent extinguished long enough to prevent them from starting even more fires. And with no archetypal extra deck monsters or restrictions within the main deck, you are completely free to utilize the extra deck however you wish, whether that's for banishing off of some pot cards or having common staples to thwart your adversary. All of these things combine to give Rescue Ace a very high floor, providing them the high ground to put out the fire.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Now, what exactly is wrong with the deck? Well, working backwards from our last point, while the deck has a good floor to work from, it also does have a lower ceiling. So I hope you aren't claustrophobic because that gap is a little short. Without any archetypal extra deck monsters, Rescue Ace also depends solely on what the main deck cards are capable of, limiting their max potential. The extra deck has been known for a good while as one of the biggest tools in the game for any deck to access, given it can be done at virtually any time. While common staples for the extra deck are vast and strong on their own, a little help for this deck wouldn't hurt a bit. Alongside that, the deck also tends to be relatively normal summon dependent, whether it be for Hydrant or Air Hoister. The deck does have other options, but these are the center of most of the deck's ability to play. Other than spraying the opponent down with a water hose to keep them at bay, Rescue Ace really doesn't have much of a plan to hold back the raging flames. Their goal is to hopefully cut off points of fuel for the fire until it eventually dwindles and burns out, resulting in a war of attrition. While this may work fine against decks heavily centered around monsters, the moment any sort of back row based or even balanced deck faces off against them, it can result in some difficulty. An example from the current metagame as of recording is Runic. It needs very few monsters to achieve its goals and is based primarily on quick play spell cards, which Rescue Ace unfortunately can have a difficult time dealing with. Not to mention the fact that many are mixing this archetype with others in the metagame to bolster their power. Speaking of power, let's now continue on to the official ratings of Rescue Ace. For this section, the deck will achieve a score of 6.5 out of 10. As previously stated, these machines are programmed to hold the line of defense instead of pushing on the aggressive side. Most of the archetype's strength comes from the actions of the opponent and its own ability to spring to action and react to it. Once the deck gains some ground, however, it will become more open for a final attack to extinguish their foes. While there are a few monsters within the center of the strategy that can tackle a decent number of foes they may face, with lack of bosses from the extra deck, Rescue Ace may face some difficulty getting over certain menaces of the format, with attack power alone at least. Now arriving at the next stop, flexibility. With a count of 9 out of 10, Rescue Ace is incredibly adaptive to the dangers at hand, or in this case, metal arms. The end goal for this deck is typically the same, but there are several roads to take to arrive at that destination. Regardless of whose turn it is, you can still get there. Similar to the known ways of the Floowandereeze, there are ways for Rescue Ace to get a good number of its own plays on the opponent's turn when they take action to move against you. Just as well, during your own turn of play, there are a plethora of actions you are able to take in achieving that game plan. Most of this flexibility is due to the fact that this deck imposes absolutely no restrictions on available lines of play. In addition, with no purple, white, black, or blue borders for the archetype, it is absolutely free to utilize this spare stack of cards as it pleases. Whether that be for cramming it full of staples and generic options, in an example, Hida the Fire Charmer Blaze and Blackluster Soldier Soldier of Chaos for starters, using it to facilitate other engines within the deck, or even just to banish for the infamous pot cards. The choice is completely yours. Thanks to the flexibility of the deck and the simplicity of its combos, understanding this strategy requires very little brain power. Naturally so, Rescue Ace will rank at an 8.5 out of 10 in complexity to reflect this notion. Essentially, as long as you are able to make it to your Turbulence and acquire your 4 back row, your game plan is just good to go. Everything else is a cherry on top. The only complexity I can think of is simply learning the different methods of getting there and then managing your resources beyond that. But we don't even really need to worry about that as much, with our field spell allowing us to recycle our cards in the graveyard and banished pile, while also netting us an extra draw. Man, this field spell really does everything for us, doesn't it? Compatibility is no issue for this deck either. With its warrior and machine typings, we are really allowed to push the boundaries of what we're able to play this with. And yes, that means we are able to play scraps with this deck. You're welcome. In my limited time testing this strategy, I've already discovered a myriad of other engines that pair well with this one. Infernoble, Machina, Gizmek, Mech Knight, and many more can offer you stronger end boards or more ability to play through certain cards or plays that Rescue Ace may have struggled with otherwise. As mentioned previously in the video, Rescue Ace imposes absolutely no restrictions on anything and has full flexibility with the extra deck, further allowing stupendous ideas. As such, this deck's compatibility deserves a 10 out of 10, no doubt. While the Pure is strong enough on its own, definitely consider some of the other variants until you find the one that suits you best. Next on the list comes Resistance, and with a score of 8.5 out of 10 in this category, there really isn't much that can get in the way of a competent Rescue Ace pilot. Hand traps can slow this deck down a little, but due to the fact that both turns are both acceptable times for this deck to play, they're simply not enough. With how strong this deck bought into the mid-range style of play, once it builds any momentum, the trophy is practically theirs to take home. With the exceptions of Lightning Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster, or really any blowout cards, there isn't much standing completely in the way of this deck's path to victory. But it is still possible to out it even in the grind game, which is why it didn't score any higher. That being said, Rescue Ace's grind game is exceptional. Considering it can just set 3 disruptions and a follow-up for free, which can't be ashed, mind you, makes it harder for many decks to consider themselves in sincere competition with this strategy for disruption. Once Turbulence hits the field, if you don't have any way to stop it, you might as well consider picking up your cards and moving on to the next table. As such, I only see it fitting to grant this category a 9 out of 10 rating. Our final topic is budget, and as far as this game is concerned, you cannot get much better. As of the release of Amazing Defenders, the most expensive card you need is Hydrant at a measly $5 a copy during time of recording. Heck, the CR versions of this card would cost you less than $100 for the full playset. Building the core needed for this strategy could be done for well under $50 if you're really on a tight budget, but even a stronger version running the important staples should max at about $200. Given these details, the deck absolutely must score a perfect 10 out of 10 in this section. And now, for the moment everyone has been waiting for, the conclusion. Drumroll, please. With everything tallied together and averaged out, we end up with an 8.79 out of 10 score. While this may not be the best score I will ever give a strategy, it is among the highest of the ones I've rated so far. Future support and metagame shifts will dictate this deck's actual standing, but for now, keep it in the back of your mind and do some testing until that time comes. I feel it may not be long before some players may come to realize Rescue Ace's true potential and claim it as their own on the path to victory. Thank you all so much for watching today's release of deck reviews. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts on this deck, and keep your eyes peeled for an upcoming deck profile and comment tutorial to help those unfamiliar with Rescue Ace. Until then, keep on saving the day, and remember, Good fun. Have luck.